can have a bit of a fun 20 minutes here today. This is quite a serious topic, but I did put my title to be playful because, you know, often burnout is approached in the press and in the media as something that, you know, can be fixed as simply as, you know, go to the gym, have a workout, have a mindful moment. We've all heard that over the last, particularly for the last few years. But, you know, I really feel that burnout is a very unique and personal experience. It is something that each of us, when we do experience it, feels it in a different way, depending on our unique circumstances, on our personal situations, our own psychological triggers, our physical surroundings, our environments. And, you know, as I was, you know, working through the pandemic, I'm very happy to see that burnout had become a topic that was in the mainstream and was discussed a lot. It actually felt to me that it was getting diluted in that process, that every publication had a how to handle burnout, how to survive working at home through the pandemic. And, you know, I felt that started to minimize the true experience of burnout, which those of us who have had it know it is an extreme emotional and physical reaction to stress. It is not something that for everybody can be cured by putting on pants and going to the gym. I did want to tell you a little bit about how I've approached this topic today. So I'm a little bit of a storyteller in life. I feel like I don't have all the answers. I don't feel like any of us really do, particularly when it comes to a topic like this. But the more we share our individual stories, the better we can be in terms of understanding our own uniqueness, and we can learn from others, understanding that there is strength in the collective, but we also need to recognize and understand our own individual circumstances. So if I go to my next slide, I'm pretty sure that's what I've put in there. So I have been burnt out on a number of times over my career. And I would say that my experience in my 20s was different from the one in my 30s, and very much different from my most recent experience after having my second child. I have the joy of having 2 under 4 and being an executive leader, which is a very different challenge that I had when I was running at my career very hard in my 20s. So as I was reading all those articles, I decided I'd gather some stories to share with you today. I spoke to my friends and colleagues across the world. That's probably a bit of a stretch, but you know, I've worked in the UK, I've worked in Ireland, I've worked in the US, and I gathered their stories. These are people I've worked with, they're people I've known for a long time. I watched them and in some cases helped them as they've dealt with their own burnout, and thought that those stories might be an interesting set to share. So I really hope in these next few minutes I can do their stories justice. I have changed their names, just so go searching through my LinkedIn for who these people may be, but these are their words. So I'm going to run through these, and then at the end, if we have time, I've got some questions and some thoughts to take away. Okay, so I asked my friends, so I've got Alexa, Mona, Amanda, and Aoife, and I've got to be very careful. I keep calling them by their real names, so I'm sorry about that. I asked them some simple questions. I said, tell me about a time you experienced burnout. I then asked them, tell me how you worked through that. And then I said, what key takeaways did you take from your experience? So the first person I'm going to talk to you about is Alexa. Alexa is early 30s, single IT product manager. And she is very much a type A, self-declared type A. And when I asked her, to tell me about a time you experienced burnout, she spoke to me about the time when she was working in a job she absolutely hated. But she had it in her head that if she quit, she would be a failure. And she had this narrative, this story where it was like, I need to push through. Shouldn't give up. I need to be resilient. She said, I remember these 3 things specifically that she's talking about, which is, she said, I found ways to cope. Like she got an exercise bike, she got a cat, and she did yoga. The only good one of those that's still there is the cat, if that helps. We did see over that time when she was trying to push herself through this, that she just started to retreat. And when we discussed that, she said she was physically exhausted from trying to cope. She pushed herself to get out of bed in the morning. She pushed herself all day. And by the time, she got on her bike and played with her cat, she didn't want to come out and socialize in the evening. She felt her existence had become about surviving a job she didn't even like. But she was terrified of giving up. So when I asked her, how did you work through it? It was really came down to the mental image she had built of herself. And she said she had this vision of being a strong person, of not quitting, of being able to push through. And this was something that had built up over many years. And it had been reinforced by others. So in her performance reviews at work, comments from colleagues and friends, and she said even her parents, but had reached the point where that had become toxic. So she redirected her strength to try and repaint the mental image of herself. And when we spoke, she spoke about how hard that was, that she had to unlearn a lot of behaviors. And I think that's the key word here. We've got these images and behaviors that we've all learned. And sometimes we need to unlearn those as our life changes, as our career changes. And she had to unlearn this lifetime of believing that putting up with bad situations was somehow good. So, she was in a situation where she was able to move through that, get a new job, and start a new narrative, is what she said. Her key takeaway was a technique that a friend of hers taught her, which she had got from a coaching session that she had had. And it's the and then what questions. If you have done coaching, you may have come across this. I know I've come across it before. But it is the moment when you feel that the worst thing is going to happen, or if you feel like you don't want to ask for something or you're going to make a change, you just ask yourself, and then what? So, I ran it through with Alexa, and she said, well, it didn't take long. I said, if I quit, then people will think I'm a failure. And then what? Well, the people I used to work with will talk badly about me. And then what? And at that point, she ran out of reasons why quitting was a bad idea. She figured, well, actually, they probably don't care and they'll move on. So that's Alexa's story. She's a definitely unique person. I think if I look at Mona's a friend of mine from the UK. We've known each other for a very, very long time. And it was a very similar experience, but she had a unique circumstance in that she has medical issues. And she needs certain accommodations made for her at work. And that her medical conditions also make her very prone to the effects of stress. So corporate lawyer, high stress job, medical issues. So she was starting to get very burnt out in work, and she could feel it in her body. But she didn't want to be perceived as being problematic, because work was doing what they should do and being very accommodating to her situation. But she still felt guilty. And she also felt scared. She felt very scared that she wouldn't be able to find other good employers with her that would take this care for her medical considerations, and didn't want to mess it up. What happened was she completely burnt herself out, and it's a high risk game for her. She got quite ill and had to take a number of weeks off work to recuperate, both physically and emotionally. So I asked her, what have you learned? What would you work through on that? What created this situation where you put your own health at risk? And again, it came down to behaviors, things we've learned over the years. She said that she's been, and I know this because I'm not for a long time, she minimizes her condition. She said she's always been navigating it in school with her other employers, and she just wanted to hide it. She didn't want that to be her story in work. But that when she combined it with actually having a really great work situation, that the two of them together created the conditions that contributed to her burnout. The reality was her employer did not see the medical condition as a problem. She did. And it was her way of dealing and coping with that, that she had built up over a number of years that had created this circumstance. In the end, hiding and pretending didn't work. It in trying to not let the team down, she ended up having to take weeks away, and she wasn't able to finish her work, which ended up making her feel worse in the long run. And she learned she can't outrun her body. She has an onus on herself to take care of herself, and she didn't do that in this instance. Her key takeaways that I'm hoping, may resonate with some of you here today is she says she reminds herself every day to check in with her body. She didn't listen. And I think that's advice we can all take. Stress and burnout tends to show up physically. And, we need to listen to our bodies every day. We need to be able to say, hey, I don't feel so good. And just recognizing that can in its own way can help. She also says she doesn't think she'll ever really get comfortable with discussing her condition. She is very adamant that's not going to be her story. And that's okay. That's how she is. But she is now more mindful of the impact of that behavior. As she's gotten older, her ability to outrun her body, as she says, is reducing. And she has to be mindful that if she pushes herself, she will make herself ill. And I think the last point here is that to be a good team player, she needs to look after herself. So again, a different situation. A lot of it, and you'll see this theme coming through, is about her situation was unique. Alexa's situation was unique to her. How they viewed the world, the lens they looked at through themselves at and through the situation at was very personal. So trying to understand that for each of ourselves as we kind of move through life and find ourselves under stress and moving into burnout, it's definitely, something that she is that she is now more aware of. I think that I'm going to move on to the next two stories, and I really want to look forward to hearing some of your opinions on this. These are stories, and this one in particular, this is one that I thought about not sharing when you see what her answer was, but I think we've all found ourselves in these situations. So Amanda is an IT architect. She's a mom. She's the one who says, I have one child, just the one. I don't think that's valid. I think if you have any children, if you've one, if you've five, it's all good. But she found herself in a situation in wintertime this year, her child just kept getting sick and missing school. She has a partner. They're very supportive. They were splitting the time, but then they started getting sick and she just fell behind in everything. She was exhausted and she found herself waking up at night worrying about work. So, she said, I got up at 3 a.m. to see if I could get work done, but ended up more exhausted and more stressed. She knew she wasn't sharp at work. She was starting to panic before the meetings. She wasn't a good team player. She wasn't collaborating well. She was in survival mode and shut down with it. And she very much felt that this situation was starting to destroy her career and she just couldn't get above it. So you will recoil in horror when you see what she did. But the point of this is to show we all tackle things in our own unique way. So I thought about not sharing this one, but I do think, we may find ourselves in a situation where this is the answer. This is a conversation I've had with I actually have a burnout coach with my own coach. And, she says, sometimes you just got to push through. And that's what Amanda did. She pushed through and she worked through the holiday period. She worked out a plan with her partner to provide the childcare. She put herself into a good state of mind every day to get up early, go for a run, get herself set up for success. But she sacrificed her holiday with her family. They did less activities, but she knew she wouldn't be able to do everything. So, the way she felt about it, and this is in on the right, was, hey, my salary pays the bills. I need to prioritize my career and I need to prioritize my work right now. And my reaction to this story is one of, was this the right thing? But it was the right thing for her. She said pushing through was her only option. She wasn't going to catch up. She wasn't going to be able to service the team. And she felt she wasn't going to be able to be a good team member until she pushed through. She said there was ways that she can, set up for success. She planned it out. She was mindful about it, but she was very aware that she was making this prioritization. So I think the difference here was she wasn't blindly pushing through. She stood back, looked at it and said, hey, I'm not going to get my head over water unless I get this done. And here's how I'm going to make sure I get that done successfully. So, her last point back to me was burnout can actually destroy your career if you let it drive your behaviors and work. So, we can all put on pants and go to the gym, but this is all about behaviors. This is what do we bring to the table? What does it trigger in us? And, how can that help us cope? I have one more story, and I know we're going to hopefully have some time for Q&A because I do ask some questions at the end. So now I'm going to talk about my friend Aoife. Aoife works in change management for large IT projects. And I think that we can all probably identify with this a little bit. She is a solo parent. She has 2 children on her own. So she laughs and says every day has the potential for burnout. But she lives in Ireland. She had a really lengthy maternity leave. She had both kids transitioned to daycare. She felt prepared. She had all her systems in place, the plan, the routine, and she went back to work. And about 2 or 3 months in, she said, I was just drained. And it wasn't that work was stressful. It wasn't that home was stressful. She kind of put everything into a plan. But she didn't feel very enthusiastic about life. Now, in this case, she did actually see her medical professional and they worked through some things, but she knew something was still a little awry. So this is the bit where I shared a technique I had learned with her where, we worked through a pie chart of what she was doing with her life. So how are you spending your time? Like if you have a pie chart, if you take your time and you cut little slices out of it and set up your various activities and you look at it, my friend was doing a lot of time on being very organized to get housework done and work done and the routine done. And she hadn't really left herself enough quality time for family and sleep. The way she looked at it when we spoke about this again before this presentation was that the routine was both her lifesaver and her soul destroyer. We took the pie chart, we drew a new one, and we didn't make it too hard. We just created a little slice called fun. And it was, try and make some time for fun. So for her, she said sometimes, it was do something fun with the kids. Sometimes it was watch a terrible, trashy TV show. And she didn't do it every day. She said, we definitely didn't want this to become another thing on the list that's running through our heads. And her key takeaways were, yes, it's great to be organized, but leave space for fun. And she said, fun can be many things. Fun doesn't have to be this big, structured, organized event. That fun could be 3 minutes of tickles. It can be just singing along to a song on the radio. And she said, you also don't always have to have fun, but whatever you do, it should replenish you. So her key takeaways were, you could be organized, but don't let the routine become the life suck. All right, there are my 4 stories. I can see stuff is popping up on the side here. I'm going to put some thoughts up. These are the thoughts that generally have been asking people. And then I can take some answers and questions on the side as well. But these are things I'd like to prompt, maybe ask yourself as you listen to those stories.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
I hope I didn't talk too fast.
No, you're getting great comments in the chat. I mean, I speak too fast, so I totally understand. And I was following along very well. Okay. But, let me just start with a few comments and then we'll jump into some questions. So people were really resonating saying yes, let the laundry list wait because it's a great way to have some free time for fun. Someone else earlier in your presentation said, yes, it's important to not just blindly push through, supporting Amanda. And that comment came from one of our audience members. But some of the questions from a little bit earlier, some of the stuff you were saying about checking in with your body, one of the questions was, is it maybe a bit too late to address stress once there's already a physical manifestation of it? In your opinion, do you have any comments on that, Lisa?
So, and I think what's interesting about these stories, these are personal friends and personal colleagues, these people I've known a long time. So in the case of, I'm going to guess this was about Mona, like it was hard to watch, right? It was hard to watch as her friend and listen as she was working through this herself. She has taken up a few things that she does now when she says she checks in with her body every day. She has her mindful moment. I know I mock them a little bit, but that's just me, but they're not for everybody. But she does. She sits and does her Wordle and has a cup of tea in the morning. And that's when she gives herself her headspace. So I'm trying to remember, I saw the client, the comment come up. I think it was about, is there a daily ritual or a daily routine?
Yeah, exactly. Like, what are things you can do to check in with yourself? And Lisa, I think, I'll let you give more examples here, but I think you just gave a perfect one. And I want to call it out because you said she does her Wordle and she has a cup of tea. I think sometimes we think like, okay, we do a meditation where we check in with every part of our body and we have to do, because we hear all these things, right? I think you just saying, listen, it can be as simple as this. And it still just centers you and calms you into routine, which allows you to kind of like know that your day is starting off on the right spot. Like, I think that in itself is a really great call out. But with that, are there other things that you think of when people ask about like what's a daily routine you could do to check in with yourself?
I think that, we all, as I say, we do talk about our mindful moments. I have friends who go sea swimming, particularly here in the island of Ireland. They'll go for sea swimming. There's others who do go to the gym. I personally like the drive to school in the mornings. I drop my kid to school. That for me is my moment of family time before I check in and come back in and start my day of work. And I make that a very important moment in my day. I've chosen for that to be an important way for me to start my day. So I think, a lot of what triggered this discussion and this topic for me was you get all these checklists, but there is no one size fits all answer. Like I get replenished by the randomness of my 4-year-old singing to Encanto. It's just
right.
That's it. Like if she's singing along to We Don't Talk About Bruno, I'm happy. And that reminds me of my priorities in life. But for others, have different priorities. Maybe bringing your dog for a walk. It may be, heading out for a swim or a walk. I have a friend who does diamond painting, which is a thing that I'm not sure exactly what it is, but she literally puts little diamond sequins into a painting. And that's her way of checking out and doing something mindless. But it's her ritual. She does it every day. And that's what she chooses to do.
I think that again just resonates so much because these are all examples of things that are what you want to do that make you feel relaxed or allow you to kind of do that zone out, do that kind of like check out. Because when you do that, if there are things that your body's kind of facing, it's gonna maybe tell you in that like open space that you're giving your brain and your body. Otherwise, we might get to a tricky point, right?
Yeah, and I think we all don't have the same things available to us, right? So, if I think about Mona, right? I've also got to remember the names I've given them in this. I'm so sorry. When I think about Mona, she has a medical condition. She's not going to get up and go for a run. She's not going to get out and swim. So the tools she has in front of her are a little different from another of my friends who runs triathlons for fun, right? Like she doesn't have the same physical capability, like I hate saying it that way, but the same physical options to her, because that's just going to make her feel iller, right? Yeah. Those of us who have, roommates, it's very hard to set physical boundaries when you're sharing your space with a roommate. It's like those environmental circumstances, you need to understand what role they play in what options you have available to you. We all live in our unique environments.
Yeah. Okay. I think, one final question, if something else comes to mind here, someone just asked, of all the burnout stories that you've collected, is there a burnout response or coping strategy that was really creative that you saw or kind of offbeat to you? Someone's just, maybe asking for an extra creative idea here.
I have a friend who wrote a book.
Wow.
Which again, I'm like, if you're burnt out, spending your evening trying to write a book and self-publish it seems like extra work. But for her, and I must see, can I find, I should put the link out. For her, it's something she always wanted to do. And in her experience of burnout, she had felt that she had lost who she was. And she was trying to find herself again. And she found that through creative writing. And she joined some online groups, started writing a novel, and I self-published it. I'm going to be honest, I haven't read it. So,
well,
but you know,
that was on the list for you, on the laundry list that you have, Lisa.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, we're going to wrap here, but thank you so much for joining us here today, sharing all of these anecdotes. There was more comments coming through about things resonating with our audience. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. And thank you for having me, Margot, and everybody. Have a great rest of your conference.
Thank you.